All right, our next category of disorders are somatoform disorders. These disorders are interesting because they are um, mental disorders that have physical symptoms. And so we're going to see a little bit about those. I got a couple different types we're going to do. We're going to look at hypochondria. We're going to look at conversion disorder, phantom pain, and then finally body-dysmorphic disorder. Like I said before, these are uh, psychological issues, traumas that are going to present as physical symptoms. You're going to see as we get a little bit into this uh, that our old buddy Sigmund Freud, from looking back at our famous names unit, is going to come back and have a part to play in this. The first one we're going to look at is something called hypochondria or hypochondriosis. You've probably heard of people being hypochondriacs before. Somebody who always thinks they're sick, or someone who thinks that maybe they're sicker than what they are. And that's really the uh, two ways you see this manifest. One is people will create illnesses that aren't there. A lot of times people will look at that as maybe a cry for attention, wanting to um, wanting the attention of an important person like a doctor or a nurse. Um, it can also be um, kind of a form of anxiety that these people are worried about um, maybe getting something, and so if they constantly have these medical tests, then they're uh, kind of puts their mind at ease that there's not really something that's wrong with them. You also see the same thing with people that do have some minor physical symptoms, but instead of something being the common cold, could be um, whatever the latest uh, big illness in the news is. These people will maybe exaggerate those things a little bit. The interesting part is trying to get to the root of why the patient's going to feel this way. Is there something, like I said, where it's an attention issue? Um, that they want the attention of somebody they feel like is important, or is it something where it's anxiety over perhaps the idea that they could get an illness that's going to um, become serious. So you really need to kind of figure out what it is. Um, Talk about that with the patient. In certain cases, uh, they will use what are called placebos. We talked about those already before. Sugar pills. If this truly is a mental issue, then those would be a unique mental solution to that. The idea that you say, hey, take this pill, you're going to feel better. And if they do, it's a pretty good indication that obviously it's not a physical problem, it's a mental problem. Probably the most famous in this category are the idea of conversion disorders. And conversion disorders used to be called hysterias back in the day. Problem is, you really don't want to call people hysterical because if you call them hysterical, usually they tend to get a little defensive or a little mad about that. And so today we refer to them as conversion disorders. There are two types that really we see a whole lot. One is the idea of conversion blindness. There's a great scene from the HBO series Band of Brothers. I'm going to link in the playlist to this one. It's a story of one of the soldiers from the 101st Airborne that has one of these conversion blindness experiences. Basically, he's in a battle and he's not actually wounded, but the mental trauma of the battle renders him blind. Same thing can happen with conversion paralysis. Conversion paralysis is the idea that part of your body becomes paralyzed. You can't use it, but there aren't any physical problems that they can point to as to why. Most famous case is this lady in the picture. And no, it's not a very good picture. I think it's the only picture known to exist of this lady. In psychological history, her name is Anna O. Her case is the one that inspires Freud to develop his talking cure. He read about this young woman. Uh, I think I told you the story before, but it's a cool one where she is taking care of her invalid father. Her father um, is going to die. He's got an illness, and it's just kind of a matter of time. And so, as she is taking care of him, um, after a number of weeks and months, she looks at it like, "Hey, Dad, would you go ahead and kind of kick the bucket?" As bad as that sounds, she can look out the window, see life kind of passing her by, and she feels really guilty about that, which I think we could all relate to. And later that evening, she falls asleep. She has this dream. She's sitting in a chair by her father's bedside. Door to the bedroom opens, and in slithers this giant black snake. And the snake wraps itself around her feet and continues all the way up her body until it gets around her arms and her legs. It squeezes. The squeeze wakes her up. When she wakes up, she's a quadriplegic. She can't move anything from the neck down. Well, they brought a bunch of doctors to check her out. Couldn't find anything physically wrong, and so she finally starts to work with a therapist who, after helping her talk through some issues, um, eventually helps her regain the mobility of her body. Reading about that inspired Freud. It was the proof he was looking for that yes, mental problems can have uh, physical symptoms, and so kind of starts him off in the direction that's going to make him famous. Uh, Third type here is what is called pain disorder. We'll look specifically at one that I think is pretty cool. It's called phantom pain. And phantom pain is pain in an amputated limb. If you talk to people who have had limbs amputated, it's a pretty common occurrence that they'll still feel things like itching or things like that in a limb that isn't there. Obviously, there's nothing to be itching if it's been amputated, if the limb's been amputated. And so, what ends up happening is that there have to be some pretty creative solutions to this. One that they use a bit today is something called mirror therapy. And in mirror therapy, and I'll post an example for you on the playlist there. Um, a doctor will use a mirror um, to basically make it seem like the missing arm or the missing leg has returned. And then the person can see uh, them scratching the itch in the mirror, things like that. And the brain gets fooled into thinking the limb is still there and can make that pain go away. They're using this a lot with veterans, amputees coming back from war zones. Like I said, pretty cool video. I'll link for you on the abnormal psych playlist. The last one is body-dysmorphic disorder. If you notice, I got a picture of Brad and Angelina here. Uh, those are they were married at one time, but two obviously big Hollywood movie stars, two people who most of us would agree are very attractive folks. They would not suffer from body dysmorphic disorder. I basically put them up there because I remember seeing once a episode of Oprah, and that she had some scientists on there who had basically come up with this computer that could look at your face and tell you, like on a scale of 1 to 10, how attractive you rated, uh, which is obviously just kind of an interesting um, exercise in itself. But Brad Pitt was one of the faces they put in, and he came out, I remember, as the most attractive person that they put in. He's a good-looking dude. Angelina Jolie got marked down a little bit because of her lips. Actually took some of the symmetry out of her face, according to the computer at least, which I thought was interesting. Body dysmorphic disorder is a disorder where a patient will fixate on part of their body and become almost obsessed with that part of the body. They can develop rituals. This is one that can be comorbid with things like obsessive compulsive disorder. This is also one that can be comorbid with eating disorders, which is the next group that we're going to talk about. People get fixated on weight or certain things and will try to change their body to meet this mental self-image that they have. This could lead to plastic surgeries, like I said, eating disorders, things like that, uh, that, that can obviously be harmful for folks when they can't get that corrected, or if they can't kind of get a more healthy, positive self-image. It can lead to some bad circumstances there as well. This is like the other four that we've seen. Really, what you're going to need um, is some talking therapy, some sessions with a therapist to try to isolate why you're feeling the way you're feeling in any of these four disorders, and how you can change those thought processes, really to be more productive, and to help patients out of the situation they're in. But those are our four somatoform disorders. Like I said, I'll link some videos for you there at on the YouTube playlist.